All right. Hey, everybody. So, as we've talked about, I know a number of times, and you're probably aware coming into this class, right? We have to do this common case analysis, this task that you're going to be given this case, you're going to be reading through it, and you're going to be doing a strategic analysis of the situation and giving strategic recommendation for what you think this business could do to better its situation or identify some of the problematic elements of it. So, some of the courses don't actually provide much guidance. Some instructors don't give much guidance as to how to go ahead and do this. And I've always found that I think my students do pretty well in this because I try to give them some definite guidance as to how to go about doing a strategic analysis and what it's all about. So, in most courses about strategic management, we use cases as, actual companies so you can practice this skill and gain some experience in the task of crafting and implementing strategy, which is really why we're here. So essentially when we use these cases, it sets forth in some factual, like realistic manner, some of the events and organizational circumstances that surround, some managerial situation you might find yourself in someday. So, it puts us in the scene of the action and really helps familiarize us with relevant circumstances and how to look at it, what to do. So the essence of your role when you do this common case here is just going to be analyze and diagnose, size up the situation described in the case, and then recommend some appropriate actions. So what does that look like? Well, I'm going to give you some suggestions of mine and some things I think work well. And the first part would be priming for the case, right? If you understand the objectives of a case analysis, you're definitely, like it says, you're going to be less likely to be consumed by whether or not you have the right answer to the case. There's not a right answer. I'll just go ahead and say that. Okay. There are plenty of things you can suggest, and all of them might be very sound. So just most people here probably have limited managerial backgrounds. If you have some, great. But a lot of us might be limited at this point on what it probably feels like to be in these situations and have only fragmented knowledge about your real life strategic situations and not understanding how this is relevant. So these are really good opportunities for you to practice identifying things that are not ideal and provide those suggestions that you think how it might make it work better, right? No one argument ultimately right, but just keep in mind the answers to these problems, they're not this, conclusive black and white ideas, right? They're messy. There are often a lot of different ways to handle them, and there might be a lot of ways of looking at them. And all I want to see is like, are you just not throwing me superficial crap that doesn't matter, or just being like, I don't want suggestions for things like, oh, I think they should just increase training, like that's such a that's just such a blasé thing to suggest to people. So I just want to see that you're giving it a little bit of thought. And I think our best test, like I say here, on whether or not your actions are right or wrong, right, is just what reason do you have to believe that it's going to lead to better results? Talk me into that, and you're sitting golden. You're sitting really nicely. So priming for the case here is just understanding. Look at that rubric of what I give you and look at the things that it's asking. And then you'll be prepared to look for those elements when you start going through the case and understanding what kind of things to start taking notes on, right? So as you prime for the case, right, as it says here, the purpose of this common case assignment is not to search the internet to try to figure out how the company actually reacted to the situation. We're trying to enhance your skills in all of these below areas, right? The important thing for you to understand about analyzing cases is it is all about identifying, diagnosing, and recommending suggestions that are aimed at just strengthening your ability to judge a situation and give some suggestion that's intelligible in some potential way, right? So if you just look at this as just you're going to discuss what the company did, and you're not going to that doesn't really constitute much of your knowledge for the situation. So I just want you to avoid that kind of thing. There are going to be elements of the write-up that do require you to just tell me about what's going on. But the important thing is the part where you give me some recommendations of what you think might work well for the organization. Okay. Um, so essentially, here are some of the steps that I would say. Like, you're going to start by trying to analyze the case, and that starts with, I always suggest to people that you skim that thing quickly. Just do it one quick time, read over it, get just a real quick, simple, dirty idea about what it's about. Understand the things that really stick out to you, and just read it quickly. Don't worry about word by word kind of thing, first of all. Once you've done that, I suggest that you do it a second time, put it away for a bit, pick it back up in a little while when you're not sick of it, read it thoroughly, and really pay attention to the facts, okay? That second time through the case, really try to gain a command for what's going on there based off of the elements in that rubric I provide you, right? Understanding what things you should be looking for. Start just writing some notes here and there, some things you think might be important, right? Because not everything is important in it, okay? These can just be easy notes. What do you think's relevant? Then carefully review all the information in the exhibits at the end, right? So there's only about, I think, 9 pages of content to the case study that you're going to be doing. And then there's about an equal number of pages of like figures and tables and things like that. Look through them for pertinent information, things that might be relevant, and just start jotting down, like, oh, when I'm talking about this, maybe I can refer to this table because that talks about something relevant to it, or this or that, right? Once you've gotten through those, try to decide what you think the real issues here are. You've written down important information, but what's the real problem with what's going on right now, right? What's the real issues that we need to address? What do you think? And several of you may have different ideas about what those issues are, and that's fine. That's actually a good thing. Shows you're looking at it uniquely. There will be some surrounding ideas that a lot of people will kind of, hover around and bring up in their case analysis, but not everybody's is going to be the same, right? This is a time for you to tell me what you think is going on, and you to tell me about, what you think the real issues here are, right? You can then do some number crunching if you would like. Some people elect not to do so much in this area, but I have given you at the end of these slides that you can get on Canvas. They'll look at all of these things. Like I give you all the information about different things you can look at in like profitability ratios, liquidity ratios, leverage ratios, activity ratios, all these different things you can look at. You are not required to go over all of these things, so please don't get overwhelmed by it, but just understand that all of these things, you can refer to them. You can do as much or as little with them as you would like in your analysis. If you don't feel quite as comfortable with all these financial ratios, we'll talk about these throughout the semester, but I understand that they're just not some people's forte, and that's fine. If you want to use these to your advantage and you feel inclined to do so, please do. If not, don't stress if you don't feel like you can adequately use them, the best of your ability. Don't worry so much about it. So back to analyzing the case, right? After you've done some of these things, what you're going to start doing is try to apply the concepts of strategic analysis that we talk about in this class. The reason I have you do this the last week is to ensure that you've gotten through all of the content for the course first. It wouldn't do you much good if you hadn't when you're going about this thing. So you'll try to start applying concepts, applying techniques, things that we've talked about, just trying to figure out which ones are applicable. Not everything I'm going to talk about in the class or that you're going to read about are all going to be necessary for the situation, but just understand some of it will be. Start figuring out ways to try to apply it by just creating notes for a while. Honestly, just the worst thing that you can do is just try to sit down and start writing the damn thing without doing all of these steps, because you'll likely come to a point where your thoughts are a mess. The coordination between your thoughts and like what you're writing down end up getting complicated and messy, and we just don't want that. Give this thing a little time. I'm giving you a full week to just spend on this common case assignment and getting ready for your final. So just try to use that time to the best of your ability to do this with some genuine effort. You'll end up in a better spot, trust me. So you then, I would say, try to make some judgments about the validity of the data and the information you've been provided. Are there things that are popping out to you? Can you support your diagnosis with some of that evidence? Can you look through there? How do I back up the things I'm saying? All these kinds of things. Just look for evidence throughout it that can support it, because just don't make baseless claims. As you're saying things, refer to, say, hey, in this exhibit or this figure, it said this makes me feel this way about it, or this makes me suggest this, right? Just use whatever is in that case or that case study to your advantage. Anytime you can back up something you want to claim or suggest or recommend, any of that kind of stuff, just use those to your advantage, right? Once you have all these notes down, you understand what kinds of things, like what kind of resources are strengths of theirs, what their competitive advantages are, or their competitive advantages that you've identified. Look for ways to align that with your suggestions. The best ones of these I ever read, continue to keep in mind, you try to align the things that are unique and valuable about the organization with your suggestions. How can you utilize the things that are unique about the organization? How can you utilize the resources they already have, the capabilities they already have, in a new way to make it even more valuable? Because having to go out and acquire new resources or abilities is pricey and time consuming. If you can utilize the things they already do well or the advantages they already have into a new strategy or a new recommendation, bingo. Do that all day, okay? My last suggestion here is, as it says, as long as you're conscientious in preparing your recommendations and you give this thing an honest shot, you're gonna get through this thing. I guarantee you, all right? Just don't turn in something that is extremely obvious that you didn't try. I've had some people in the past, and it's unfortunate when I get ones like that, because this is a lot, like it's a significant amount of your grade. It shouldn't tank you if you give this thing an honest shot. Just try to make sure that the things you suggest to me make sense, okay? I don't need you to be a strategic mastermind. I don't need you to know it all. Give this thing an honest effort. That's what I'm looking for from you. All right. Now, some thoughts about your recommendations in that sense, right? Your recommendations that you're going to give me, hopefully this doesn't shock you. We want them to have a good prospect of success, meaning that I don't want you to suggest things to me that are like highly risky, bet the company kind of recommendations. Give me things that are actionable, that align in the way I just said. Give me an idea like how those things will materialize to some favorable outcome performance-wise for the organization. And just tell me why. That's it, right? Tell me how your recommendations solve the problem you identified early on in your write-up. And keep in mind this idea that if you're giving me a good suggestion will be possible for the company to implement. It's going to be workable in terms of the things that they already have. It will align with those competencies or, their competitive advantage potentially. And it needs to be a realistic option based off of those market and industry constraints that you talk about in your analysis. So you'll give me your recommendations, you'll state them sufficiently and give me some specifics, right? If there's a problem with the people at the top of the company, don't just say they need better leadership training. Great. I think a lot of us could come to that conclusion. The devil's in the details. Tell me what they need to do. Avoid those kinds of like unhelpful statements, right? So, for instance, let's say if you think the firm should improve its market position, if you think it needs to improve its market position, you got to help me by setting forth how you think that should be done. The idea is not the important thing, it's the details. Tell me how you think that would be done. Give me an agenda for action, or stipulate some sort of timetable or some sequence for initiating those actions for me, right? Tell me what priorities you would place. Tell me, like, who should be responsible for doing which actions based off of, the things you've told me about the organization, right? Just give me some more details than being super vague. Being super vague will not necessarily get you the highest of grade on this thing. Just understanding that, just give it a shot for me. That's all I'm looking for from you, okay? So as a rule of thumb, I say here, avoid suggesting things you wouldn't personally be willing to do if you were in the shoes. So don't fully remove yourself from the situation. If you wouldn't be comfortable suggesting it or doing it, don't suggest it to me, right? The importance of doing this is to show me that you've gotten some, element of good managerial judgment when it comes to strategic decision making. It really also should go without saying here, this report, one of the most important things about it is got to be well organized and well written. Take your time doing this thing. If you can turn in one deliverable by the end of your collegiate career that's really been paid attention to and done well, make sure the formatting and stuff looks good. Don't turn things in that are spelled wrong, that have a lot of punctuation problems and all that kind of stuff. Give it the time, run it through Grammarly. You get it free through the university. So use these things you have. They're very simple to do, but just make sure you do them, okay? Now, the format, this is the thing. I'll give you, I give you these slides, so we won't necessarily exhaust all of them, but you're going to talk about the central issue. You're going to basically tell me what's the big problem going on here. Then you're going to do an industry analysis. Now, you remember we talked about this idea of the Porter's 5 forces. Your industry analysis is going over all 5 of these again. Now, we've talked about these in an earlier lecture, so I'm not going to exhaust it, but you're going to use this framework in order to do your industry analysis, and you're going to tell me not just what's present with each of these, but tell me, what is your assessment? Or is it high, moderate, low in each of these areas about the industry analysis from Porter's 5 forces, okay? You'll also include an environmental analysis. If you remember this framework, the PESTLE framework, tell me which ones you think are relevant. Not all of them necessarily are, but tell me what about them is relevant in the larger economic sense about what is impacting business and just business in general in that sense based off of this analysis. We talked about this in an earlier lecture as well, so I won't exhaust that, but just understand when you're doing your industry and your environmental analysis, those are the frameworks that you're going to use. You'll also talk about what the current strategy for the company is. You're going to talk a little bit about, what are the steps it's currently taking? What do you think is working and not? Tell me about the distinguishing characteristics. What kind of resources does it have unique access to that positively adds to its success? What approaches maybe does it use that are an advantage to it? What unique elements about its culture or value chain characteristics might set it apart? All of these kinds of things. And then by looking at those distinguishing characteristics, what is its competitive advantage right now? What is the unique, distinct competency or resource or process or whatever it is about this organization that sets it apart, that is its competitive advantage against its competitors? You'll have a section that touches on your recommendations, which this part is worth 20% of the entire thing. So make sure you pay attention to all the things we've talked about so far. And you'll do financial implications. You'll tell me a little bit about how do your recommendations materialize to better financial performance for the organization and in what ways? And, I don't need you to be spot on. I don't need it to be perfect. I don't need you to have super nuanced specifics for me. Give it a shot for me and tell me in what kind of ways do you think that the recommendations you gave will materialize in some sort of positive financial performance for the organization. Try and be specific if you can. Use some of those metrics we talked about earlier. Tell me why you think they'll increase or decrease or this or that. Just tell me, just try to be specific, okay? And then provide me some references. You'll want this thing to stay within the 3-page limit. Your references are not included in that 3 pages. So if you have a table of contents, if you have a title page, or you have references, all those kinds of things, those will not count toward your content pages. All the rest of that stuff, that I want 3 pages of content. Anything else, like, that won't count against those 3 pages. So don't worry if it exceeds that because of those. So it will be important that if you're making certain claims, try to find some references to back up the things that you're saying. It can be our book, it can be lectures that I've given, it can be readings, it can be research based off of those databases that I provide you. If you click on the assignment for the common case on Canvas, I give you links to several different repositories that can help you look through research and find things, so that if you're looking for a way to align your recommendations with positive financial outcomes, hopefully we can find you some research that helps back that up, and you can use that as a reference to say, this is why I'm suggesting it. It's not just my opinion. Other people agree with me too. So that's about all we've got in walking through this. And like I said, if you need anything else from me as you're putting this thing together, just reach out. I'm just at the end of that message. So good luck to you.